If you're on a spiritual path or you've had a spiritual awakening experience, there's a danger that you probably don't even see coming. It's the slow, silent drift into old patterns, snapping at people without meaning to, drowning in worry, feeling stuck in old patterns that you swore you'd outgrow. And here's the painful truth. If you don't learn to recognize the real signs of spiritual progress, you can meditate for years and still feel like nothing's changing. And you miss the moments that your soul is actually calling you to rise. In this episode, we break down the exact markers that show that you're evolving and the traps that keep modern seekers stuck. So if you care about your inner life, you can't afford to miss this one. My name is Abhinava, and you're watching and listening to Spirit Matters, a podcast helping modern seekers integrate their spiritual practice into their daily life. My co-host Vajan and myself are meditation teachers with over 25 years of experience, and every week we break down a new spirituality challenge. If you enjoy our content, we'd really appreciate it if you can subscribe to our channel, leave a comment, or rate us in your favorite podcast app. Without any further ado, let's dive in. Today we are talking about signs of spiritual progress, how to know when you are growing spiritually. And it's maybe good to define what we mean by that, by progress. And so I think one of the things is that when we practice spirituality, when we meditate, when we pray, when we do chanting, and etc., we become more aware of our soul, of our inner divinity, whatever name you want to call that. And so that's one aspect of progress, but I think it's not the whole story. So becoming aware of the soul is important, is part of progress, but real spiritual progress also means nature's perfection. That's how our teacher Sri Chinmoy refer to it often. And not every spiritual path is into nature's perfection, but ours is. And I think it's really important to take that into the account of spiritual progress, because becoming aware of your soul is one thing. But if your nature, your personality does not change with your awareness of the soul, then it just stays as knowledge or as an experience, and you're not really bringing it into the world. So with that inner soul, with the light of the soul coming forward, we also want to see that manifested in our outer nature, in our personality. Won't you agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that. And I think one of the wonderful things about real lived spiritual progress is it requires you to get your hands dirty. It requires you
Nice.
to get into the world and to do something and to interact with the world in some way and offer something. And I really like Sri Chinmoy had this beautiful analogy about the perfection of the world or perfection of reality. And he liked to use the analogy of the potter. And so someone who is making something out of clay, and if the person is too afraid or too apprehensive or too fearful to actually get their hands dirty and actually put their hands into the clay, it's impossible to start shaping the clay. The clay will always just be like a big, doughy ball of dirt and whatever else you put in to make the clay.
Sometimes there's a temptation for spiritual people to withdraw from the world, to live a monk-like life in a monastery or an ashram. And that's very tempting because you can really focus on your inner practice. But at the other hand, it doesn't. I think a life in the world makes you much stronger because you have to deal with the imperfections and the ignorance of the world around you, and you have to, see how you are behaving with your spiritual progress in the world, and it actually makes you stronger because you have much more challenges to have. So sometimes people think that a life like that, makes you so strong spiritually, but if you never test it against the real world, then, I guess your inner strength does not really grow.
No, and one other thing that can happen there is if you are living a life that is more solitary or more reserved or disconnected from the world around you, it's very easy for all of your experiences to be happening in the thought world. And the thing about thinking and the inner experiences you have in the thought world is it's very easy for that to be very pristine and very clean and very tidy, because it doesn't have to deal with the three-dimensional, textured, gritty reality of the world around you. So if you have taken on a spiritual practice and you're living somewhere where you're not called to be interacting with the world every day, you can be thinking about your spiritual life in a very beautiful way. You can be imagining the progress that you're making and imagining that you're some sort of, there's a beautiful flower inside you blossoming. And it's all very clean and it's all very pure and it's very disconnected from the gritty reality of actually making that happen in the physical world. So I think this topic. really calls to that experience of actually lived spirituality is not as pure and pristine and clean and tidy as it is in your imagination. It's something much more real and visceral.
Yeah, because what if your boss at work starts shouting at you? Can you still maintain that flower inside, or are you, immediately lashing back and feeling this tremendous anger rise up? That's
Yeah,
never.
and probably your boss shouting at you was not part of your visualization of your day ahead of you. If you're sitting there in the morning and you're doing your spiritual practice and you imagine that during the day you're going to be like a beautiful lamb walking in the world, offering only kindness and sweetness. That's very easy to do when you're still inside your room and you're still just visualizing and imagining these things. But when you actually go out and face the world head on, you find that those things that you're imagining to be true may not be the only reality. Because when you go into the world, there's an infinite number of other wills operating at the same time, and they all come and create friction and conflict. And so that's really where you're tested to the highest
Nice.
level.
So I'm glad we just delineated the boundaries there. So it's progress in the world, nature's perfection, becoming aware of the soul. And I wrote down a couple of signs of how you know to make progress. And maybe I can read them out one by one, and we can kind of riff on them. And the first
Wonderful.
one is something that our spiritual teacher Sri Chinmoy always repeated again and again. And I think it's the most obvious sign that you're making progress, because he said progress is happiness. Happiness is progress. So how to know if you're making spiritual progress? How happy are you? Your state of, and this is not, it's good to distinguish here between pleasure and joy. So real inner happiness is always connected with inner joy and peace. Whereas, pleasure is when we, let's say, either we gratify the senses or we gratify our ego. That is more the happiness that comes from pleasure, but it's fleeting. This happiness does not last and does not build on itself. Whereas the happiness that comes from within, the true inner happiness, that always grows. And there's an innate satisfaction in that kind of happiness. What do you think of this definition? Progress is happiness.
Yeah, I think for most people, that's going to be the most clear cut and the most commonly experienced sign that they're going in the right direction and things are happening in the right sort of a way. Because when you start to have that sense of self created happiness that's not based on any of your outer circumstances and it's just naturally welling up inside you, that seems to me to be such a clear sign that something you're in some way in alignment with the universe. You've in some way got yourself in harmony and balance into alignment with the nature, the deeper nature, not just the outer nature, but like the deeper spiritual nature of reality. And so there should be some corresponding sign. There should be some reaction that, okay, there's some experience coming from getting myself in tune with reality. And I think that's one of the nicest ones because it's really what everyone is looking for. I mean, if you really get down to the nitty gritty of what someone is hoping to experience on a daily basis, it's some sense of enjoyment and happiness that just purely from the living of their life, not from having to chase after something they don't have or like trying to cling on to something that they already possess. Instead, just simply enjoying, having life becoming pleasurable. Like
Yeah.
life itself, the experience of it becoming something that is actually enjoyable, and there's a positive reaction coming from that.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with the fact that our soul is all happiness. It's just the natural state, the fabric of our soul, of our inner nature. And that some of that happiness just comes to the fore. It just enters into the other layers of our being, into our mind, into our vital, into our physical consciousness. And it colors everything. And Sri Chinmoy speaks about when you go out into the world, everything you see gives you a sense of joy. Like even if you see a really angry person, you get a sense of joy from your own inner happiness. Like the things outside you do not influence that happiness. It's so strong. So
Yeah,
that's
and I think most people who have practiced meditation seriously have had periods in their life which they probably would base probably would say it has come from their practice, where they have had times where they have walked through the world with a deep sense of happiness welling up inside them. And it's not something that you're going to experience in the same way every day or every moment. And yeah, it's not something that you should even chase after or cling on to when you do have that experience. It's something to be enjoyed, something to be incredibly grateful for, but it's something as well that in some ways it's outside of your control. It's your role is to do your practice and to be as present as possible and to act out your role in the world in the best way you possibly can. And at some times in your life that you'll feel incredibly happy doing that. And at other times, which is really interesting, that you'll be doing the exact same actions and you'll be trying to be in the same type of consciousness, but you won't feel the same sort of happiness. And that's something that you have to accept and know that sometimes the game is, from our human perspective, is very inscrutable. It's not exactly clear why something happens one time and it doesn't happen another time. But I think that's one of the great things that we learn through playing this game over a period of time, is to have faith. Is to have faith that I know I'm on the right track. I know I'm doing the right things. Like I was so happy a year ago or 6 months ago, and I know at some point again that happiness will return. And at this point, like I'm still have to do the work though. It's like I don't just do the work to get the feeling or the sensation or the experience of happiness. I do the practice and do the work because I know it's the right thing to do. I know
Yeah.
it's what my soul wants me to do.
There's this famous spiritual quote, there's no way towards happiness. Happiness is the way. It's often
Mm,
attributed to the Buddha, but it's not from the Buddha. It's a beautiful quote nonetheless. And I read
yeah.
something yesterday in one of Sri Chinmoy's books, which really was so revealing, because sometimes he wrote about when people do not meditate, they have a very happy day. And then when they do meditate, they have like a bad day. And so, stupidly, they think, okay, so I should stop meditating because my days when I don't meditate are much better. And he said that is actually a wrong way of thinking, because what is actually happening is that God is testing you. On the days when you meditate, God is saying like, okay, are you really spiritual? Okay, let's see if you can live through this day and have a little bit of adversity thrown in your path. Can you still meditate? So sometimes it is put to the test. And this is like a wrong conclusion to think like, oh, only the days when I have good feelings and happiness. And if I don't meditate, I have a happy day. So I should always just stop meditating. But also to be aware of the fact that we are tested. Like the universe does throw these challenges into our path. And like you were saying, like you were speaking to earlier, it's the fact that it's not always there, even though you go through the same actions, is something that you should be aware of.
Yeah, and that makes the game much more interesting as well, because you see it's not a linear experience. It's not that I do this one thing, or I do this action, and I get some particular result, and then each time I do the action, I get the same result, or I get more and more of that particular result. It's not how the game of life is experienced, and you could think, oh, well, that's in some way is unfair or it's unjust, but who are we to know from our limited perspective? We can't even see the full, the board of, of the game that we're playing at the moment. We can't even
Yeah.
see where the boundaries exactly are. And we can't see how truth or the deeper realities reveal themselves to us. So there has to be a sense of faith that I know that in the past, I've got these positive experiences. I've got these great outcomes from doing these practices. I know that these are the right actions to be taking for me and in my life, and to have faith that if I continue on this path, that things that I can't even imagine yet will happen, and they will be infinitely more fulfilling and meaningful than any other options that I have.
No, I like this idea you just put up as the Cosmic game as a board game. But do you think it's more like a Monopoly board or like a Risk board?
I think it's got many layers, and
Oh,
I think it's like snakes and ladders, isn't it? Like sometimes you go on, you climb up the ladder, and then next thing you know, oh no, you've gone down a snake, and you're like
snakes and
three
ladders.
levels, three levels back down. So
Great. So good. And I think another sign which is correlated to this one of progress is happiness, is that you experience less and less negativity. So at the one hand, you're
mm,
drawn more to the spectrum of light, of happiness, which automatically means you move away from the spectrum of darkness and negativity. So also a good sign is to look back at how much doubt, how much insecurity, how much jealousy, how much worry and anxiety and fear are you experiencing. And if that is less, and you can really see that after a few months of spiritual practice, that you do experience less of those things, that also means that you're making progress.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people's daily experience of life, that is actually going to make the biggest difference of anything. So
Yeah.
people have times where they've been happy and they've been unhappy. Those things come and go. But people are much more often ruthlessly tormented by their own negative emotions and their own negative qualities. So if you're really prone to jealousy, or you're really prone to fear or worry, or whatever it is that is your particular um, um, burden to bear, if you could in some way reduce that, that for so many people in the world would make the biggest difference in the world. Because there's so many people that are just like, oh my God, I would just love to have a day without so much worry, without so much fear, without so much doubt, whatever it is. And some of those qualities really torment people, from morning to night. Like if you're a real worrier, and so you get up in the morning, you start worrying about one thing, it never ends. There's no end to the
You
number of
mean
things you could worry about. So.
a worry, not a worrier, not a warrior, right?
Yeah, a worrier, not a warrior.
Yeah, it's your New Zealand accent that makes it a little hard to understand sometimes. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think if you can do a practice that is going to reduce some of those qualities in your life, and you can actually start to see those things reducing, and you start to realize that instead of having a negative thought or a negative emotion tormenting you, every hour, it's only tormenting you every second hour, every third
Yeah.
hour. That is going to make such a big difference in your day-to-day life, that I think that's something that people should really. I like the analogy of consciousness existing like an old balance scale. So you have two
Yeah.
sides, and you put weight on one side, and you can remove weight from the other side. And that's a really good model for consciousness, because you can always imagine that you can do things that are going to help elevate your consciousness. So it's going to lift up your consciousness. But alternatively, on the other side, there's all of the things that you experience that bring your consciousness down, that make you heavier, that make your consciousness darker and more miserable. And if you can actually start removing a few things from that negative side of the consciousness scale, you'll find that your life improves so quickly. Whereas if you're only seeking for these high, transcendent, beautiful experiences, you'll have those experiences. But then for the next 10 hours, if you're caught by fear and doubt and worry again, it's still not the right balance. You still need to remove a whole bunch of these negative things, because going through life, we pick up all sorts of these ideas and habits and patterns that get stuck somehow inside our being. And all of us have experienced them, and experienced how frustrating they can be. And so when you are doing the practice, and you are noticing that you're having less of all of those negative experiences, you should be incredibly grateful, because that is the thing that is going to transform your life on a daily basis, and is going to really allow you to live the life that you really dream of.
Wonderful. Now, the second sign I wrote down is to notice, first of all, the difference between the desire life and the aspiration life. Um, Chinmoy also commented that there's actually only two lives that we can lead. One is the aspiration life, the spiritual life. The other is the life of desire, which sometimes called the ordinary life. And it's maybe good to distinguish between what we mean by desire. So it's not having any goals in life. It's not having any dreams. But I think desire is always either connected to sense gratification. So just, pleasure of like eating a lot of chocolate, smoking excessively, drinking excessively, indulging in all these things for sense pleasure. And the other thing is like the gratification of our ego. So these are desires that have to do with name and fame, status, prestige, boosting up our ego. And so I think it's very important to ask yourself, when you're pursuing a goal, what is the reason that's behind that goal? So let's say you want to become, a university professor. Is that so that you can help the world and, bring light into the world? I would say then it's fed by aspiration, by like the right intention. Or is it because then, your status will increase and people will really admire you and adore you. And it's for that reason, then it's fed by desire. So it's important to investigate, what are my motives? What is the intention I put into my life's goal? And then to see that a sign of progress, I think, is that you notice that your desires are decreasing. So you become less interested in things like just sense gratification or ego buildup, that these things just fall by the wayside, because it's so much more inspiring, adventurous, and just so much more interesting to feed that spiritual side in you and to see that your soul is growing and putting all these wonderful inspirations into your life. And you can have amazing goals just coming from this deep part of yourself. And then it's the aspiration in your life increases. So then aspiration is the inner cry. It's the longing for the things that are within us. So not ego, not the senses, but just the deeper things, peace, light, joy, the heart qualities, the divine qualities, becoming aware of our soul. And yeah, so aspiration increases, desire decreases. What would you say?
Yeah, so talking about the two different types of life we can live, the life of aspiration or the life of desire, it's interesting because I think people think there's a lot more options out there than that. So some people think, oh, but no, but I want to become, a professional athlete. And no, 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 I want to become an artist. And no, I want to become, a great businessman. They think that all of these are completely different goals. But what you're saying, and what Sri Chinwe has said, which is incredibly wise, is that if you actually look behind them and look at what is the intention of that goal, like what am I actually, what is my true motivation for that goal? And so there's a good analogy, and it ties in with this great paradox. And the paradox is called the man in the car paradox, which I was just reading a book which was talking about this, and so this reminded me. So a lot of people want to have something in the world that is a representation of who they want people to see them as. And so a good example was having a really nice car. So there's a lot of people in the world who think, I really want to have a really nice car. And what they're seeing in the car is not just the fact that they want to have a nice car. They don't just want to have a particular car that they're going to drive around. What they're really looking for is the car is a proxy for respect and admiration. And they think if I had a really nice car, then people would look at me and they would really respect me and admire me. And I thought this was so funny. I thought, oh yeah, I think that's why you see a lot of people chasing after these kind of conspicuous, consumer goods, something that people can see, like having, a really expensive, amazing watch, or an
Yes.
amazing car, or, some really expensive, conspicuously, fancy clothing or whatever it is. But the paradox with it is people, when they see a man in a fancy car, they never admire and respect him. What they do instead is they imagine, what would my life be like if I had that car? So they're not seeing the person in the car and thinking, oh, wow, I really admire and respect that person. They're seeing the person in the car and thinking, wow, what would my life be like if I had a car like that? And then most of the time they get a little bit sad and depressed because they don't have a car like that. So,
And
so
I
the
think also
person,
they become a little bit angry at the guy in the car. It's like this rich,
yeah,
you know, rich guy.
but
What does he think he is? Huge
I thought that's
ego.
so funny that that's a strategy that people are using to try and get respect and admiration. But instead, it does no such thing. People see you in your fancy car and think, oh God, like, what would my life be like to have such a car? God, I
Yeah,
wish I had such a car.
yeah.
And there's no thought of the person in the car, actually. The person in the car, he just becomes sort of a placeholder. So I thought that was a really good analysis that someone made. That was not my idea. It's sort of a book about the psychology of money, I think. But it kind of shows that very often we've got a particular goal in the world and we've got some strategy to go about that. So like even becoming a doctor or becoming, getting a high level professional credentials, often we're wanting that as a way to earn the respect and admiration of other people. But people don't respect someone simply because of their title or what they own or what they have. People respect other people because of who they are and how they act in the world. So it's actually a much better strategy to try and become a kind, loving, generous person. That is the sort of strategy that people will actually respond to, that people will actually respect and admire you for having those qualities. And because people realize as well, that's often actually much more difficult to achieve than material success.
I think it's in the long term that those things happen. Like in the short term, if you go to a
Yeah,
party and you're talking with these people and you say, "Hey, I'm a neuroscientist," immediately there's like a little hush, and I think
yeah.
that's where they get their kicks. Like, "Oh, I'm a neuroscientist. Whoa, that's really an intelligent person. Wow." But then if you play the long game, like over time, if the neuroscientist is like just this really rude guy who doesn't care about others and just about his own
Yeah.
ego, then yeah, the respect will decrease. And, the person who's quietly in the background, being a really good person and being self-giving, eventually earns the respect. So it's more like the short-term, long-term thing. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that was the second one, the desires decreasing, the aspiration increasing. The third one is that you stop blaming others for things that happen to you in your life. And I think this is an important one. I think what's underneath that is you take full responsibility for your actions, and even the ones you're not aware of. So it has to do with becoming aware of the law of karma, that everything you do has a reaction. It comes back to you. And so as you sow, so you reap. And that if you take that realization to the very end, it means that anything that happens to you was also instigated by you, by an action, a thought, or a word that you spoke in the past that comes back. So anything that is negative that happens to you, if you take full responsibility for your life, you kind of have to say, okay, that was my action. It manifested perhaps with somebody else doing something to me, but it's my karma. So I take full responsibility. I accept it. I accept this, and I don't blame the other person for destroying my life or for doing this, being very angry with me. Or so, and I think it also has to do with that you are in control of your own reactions. So even if somebody is extremely rude to you, you don't have to become rude as well. You don't actually have to let that influence your consciousness. And the more progress you make, the more strong your, let's say, your energy shields become, and the less affected you will be by the behaviors of others. So what do you think about that one? Like not blaming others?
Yeah, I think that frees people from the role of the victim, and it allows them to step into the role of really being the instigator and really the author of the story of their own life. And I see so many people that are so stuck and suffering because of experiences that they've had. And there's always someone else to blame for that experience. And the problem with that is, even if you are right that someone else is more responsible than you are, it still doesn't take away the pain or the hardship or the difficulties that you've been through. It doesn't negate those things. And it doesn't free you to start moving forward. When you're trapped in the world of victimhood and blame, you're always the victim. It's always someone else's fault. And that's not a powerful place to approach life. It's not a powerful place to approach reality. And it doesn't give you much freedom to allow you to move on, to step away and leave behind those negative experiences and traumas and all of the parts of the human experience that are not so beautiful and not so welcome in our lives. But as soon as you do take that step and you start to take full responsibility and you start to see yourself as really the instigator of all of the experiences that you're having, you suddenly start to have agency. You start to be able to make different choices. You start to be able to make different actions that are then going to create a different reality and a different future for you. And we've talked before about the experience of time. And I think from a spiritual point of view, most people have the picture of how time flows completely wrong. So they imagine that everything in the past has created the present moment. But on our podcast here, we have talked before about if you imagine the idea of a boat crossing a lake. And if you have the model that everything in the past, all of the experiences in the past have led to you being where you are in the present moment, you would look at a boat crossing a lake and you'll see the ripples behind the boat. And you would think, oh, the ripples must be pushing the boat along. So the ripples are the thing that are causing the boat to be where it is in the present moment. But we know, looking at it, we know that the boat is actually creating those ripples when in the moment its engines are running and it's creating, its propellers are turning, that's creating the ripples. So all of the past is actually being created here in this present moment. And so when we feel as though our past is not beautiful, it's not helpful, it's not useful, the way to transform our past is not to go back into the past. We can never go back into the past and change the events that have happened because they always happened in the here and now. All of those painful, traumatic experiences, they never happened in the past. They always were happening in the here and now. And if you want to start creating a more beautiful past for yourself, you do that again in the here and now. It's each word I speak, each thought I have, each action I take creates either a beautiful past or a past that I'm going to regret. And so every day we have the opportunity to create a much more beautiful past for ourselves by living that day as well as we possibly can. And I think those two ideas combined, that we're 100% responsible, and also that we're creating our past here in the present moment, they tie together to really allow us or inspire us to try and be more present, more active, more loving, more committed to our life on a daily basis. Because when you realize that, when you look back at all of that past that you've got behind you, that was all created in the here and now. And when it's not satisfactory to us, when it's not beautiful in the way we'd like it to be, or meaningful in the way we'd like it to be, we have full responsibility today again to try to create more beautiful memories and more beautiful past for ourselves.
Yeah, wonderful. And I think the more you make spiritual progress and grow spiritually, the less inclined you are to blame others. It just happens
Mm,
naturally. Yeah, you more feel like, okay, I have agency over my life. I'm responsible for my life. I'm the only one I can change. You cannot change other
yeah,
people. That's another misconception. Like, even if they are to blame in some way, like, what's that going to
yeah,
help? Like you say, you just get stuck in victimhood. And you can change
yeah,
only your own actions and your own intentions. Okay, nice.
exactly.
So the number 4 is that you become less impulsive in your reactions. This is something that I noticed, people who are doing our meditation classes very quickly notice. After a few weeks of daily meditation, they already feel that they become less impulsive. So that means that there's a little bit of a break between an impulse coming in, like a stimulus, and their reaction. And they're able to control that. So instead of like snapping back when somebody is rude, or immediately becoming sad or angry at something, you have a moment where you say, hey, wait a minute, I can react differently here. I can react from a place of peace or acceptance or love or compassion. And that's a sign of progress, when you notice that you're not so impulsive anymore. You can go through your day more composed, and more from this place of acceptance and wisdom.
Yeah, I like that idea of. I like to talk about it as becoming less reactive. So it's that because often those very quick reactions that we make cause us to take actions that we're not proud of. It's when we, snap at a child, or shout at someone at a restaurant, or um, just belittle someone for some mistake they've made, or whatever the action is. If it's very reactive, it's normally not going to be in our own best interests, or the best interests of the people around us. And so, having that space and that presence that comes from doing spiritual practice, of that, it's that space of awareness where you begin to feel the reaction, and you begin to sense that there are other options, there are other avenues to take in that moment. That becomes such a transformative experience in your life, where you're no longer just trapped reacting to whatever circumstances you find yourself in. You actually start to become the master of your own ship, and you start to realize that I've tried this strategy 100 times, like, shouting or reacting in a very quick and
Yeah, it never
harsh
really
way.
ended well, did it? It never ended
No.
well.
So it's an amazing thing when you have a moment where you see that reaction coming, and then you realize, hang on, I could do something different today. That is such a revolutionary moment in people's lives, when they have that moment for the first time, where they
Yeah.
see the way that they would always react in the past. And then they realize there actually still is a choice. There always is a choice. So even if you've always reacted, hundreds and hundreds of times to the same stimulus in the same way, each time it comes up, you still have a choice whether you're going to follow the old pattern, or whether you're going to try and do something new. And that's something that you get from your spiritual progress. You start to become aware of that moment when it's happening.
And there's a Buddhist idea, it's called Praticca Samutpada. They call it breaking the chain. And to them,
Mm,
it's actually the key to liberation, where normally you go through life action and reaction, and just this perpetual chain of events, and you don't become free of it. You're stuck in samsara, in the endless cycle of birth and rebirth. But they say, actually, to break that chain, the first step is just like that we talked about just now, that little break between a stimulus and your reaction. And there's the key to liberation. And that's very, it's poignant, it's significant. that little break in action is actually a real revelation. It's a real step into a new self, a new future.
And one of the things it does as well is that we're not really who we think we are. We think we're this combination of likes and dislikes and memories and particular, the idea that I'm not good at maths, but I'm good at art, and I've got a short temper and I've got no patience, and all of these are just stories we've told ourselves to explain the patterns and the habitual actions that we take in these types of reactive situations. And so if we're someone who's always told ourselves that, I don't have any patience and I'm always, very short tempered, all it takes for us to start to change that story is to be aware of the chain of reaction as it's starting to play out, and being able to choose to take that energy in a different direction. And then once we actually start doing that, we start realizing, like, wow, I always thought I was XYZ quality. I had this particular quality, or I didn't have this particular quality. But when we actually realize it's just a habitual way of responding to the stimulus of the world, and then when we realize we can actually change that, it's an amazing thing, because you realize that so many of the ideas you had about yourself are actually wrong, and they're just all they simply are is the patterns and the bad habits that you got into through life. And
Yeah.
so,
I was going to say, just like creating a new past, you can also create a new personality by the actions that you're
yeah,
doing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
and it's so nice when you see that and you start to realize that each time that you make a new action, it's a vote for a different picture of yourself in the future. It's a vote for you becoming a different character as the game moves forward. And so each time you make a kind action, or you make a generous action, or you make a compassionate action, you're starting to make it's like, another vote for that being who you are. And if you're unhappy with the character that you've been playing so far in life. And I think most people are, because most people at some point just are getting fed up of just the same stimulus and the same reactions over and over and over again. And when you realize that you have the freedom to actually start changing those things, that's an amazing power that you've developed. And that is spiritual progress in action there. Like, as soon as you start making better decisions and you start breaking some of these chains, you're making tremendous progress. So
Yeah.
anytime you experience that, you should be incredibly proud.
I saw that kind of destructive pattern behavior in my parents' marriage when I was a kid, because they would have these. Immediately, I knew when they were going to go into a fight, because there would this reaction, and then the mother would say this, and the father would say that, and dun, 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 dun. It was so predictable. And even as a child, I
Yeah,
was saying, "Oh, here we go again." Okay, and it's just like you
yeah,
just think like, why? Why would you still continue doing that? And it just shows how caught up we often are in these patterns and how strong they are.
yeah,
It's not easy to
yeah.
break them. Yeah, and I think that's why, again, the importance of a spiritual practice comes in, just to bring that extra awareness, to
Hmm.
recognize the break in the action. And it happens naturally. Like I said, many people who do the meditation classes, they experience that after 3 or 4 weeks. They all say, "Yeah, I just feel so less impulsive, so less reactionary in my behavior." It's just a real
Yeah.
great. So that's number 4. So the next one is, how do you know if you're making progress? Is you're having much more the idea of newness and freshness coming into your life, like the absence of this staleness and this daily grind, and your life feels new. Your life feels fresh every day. Do you want to riff on that?
Well, I mean, that is a beautiful thing, and I think it's one of the things that people have experienced that, and that's one of the things why people love traveling. Because when you travel and you go outside of your regular daily routine, suddenly you pay attention to things more, because you're like, wow, what is this place? What is the culture here? What is the behaviors and the actions of the people? And you see new foods and new colors and new ways of doing things. And so for that period of time, people feel like really stimulated and they feel really present in the world. And they're like, wow, look at all these things. And they forget that we actually have the power to live that out on a daily basis. And I think that is one of the signs that you are really in alignment with reality, when you start to see newness and freshness even in your everyday surroundings. Because the
Yes,
world around us is full of infinite information, even in your
exactly.
one room you're living in there. you're never experiencing even 50% of it. There's so much more depth and complexity, just even in this one space around you at any moment that you could manage to deal with. And it's the same as soon as you step out onto the street in Amsterdam, there's so much going on. And Amsterdam is never the same. It's not the same today as it was yesterday, and tomorrow it'll be a different place again, because it's made up by the physical place, but also the consciousness and the people inhabiting that. And those things are always changing, and the weather, nature is always playing its role. And so if you can go around your own city and perhaps your bike commute to work, and if you can really pay attention, every day you could notice something that you've never seen before. It may be, a gargoyle on a building somewhere, or, a painting seen through the window of someone's house, or, someone walking to work, or whatever the situation you find yourself in. There's always the potential to see new things that you've never experienced before, even just on your commute to work. And I think that's a real sign that you are living a spiritual life, because there has to be a tremendous openness and awareness to pick up these things. If you close down and you fall into your habitual patterns of the mind, your mind will filter out all of those things. Your mind will see the traffic lights, it'll see your watch, see how many minutes you've got to get to work. And so the whole amazing tapestry of people going about their lives and living these, ridiculously interesting experiences, you won't see that. You'll see, okay, there's a man, there's a car, there's, another cyclist, I've got to
Yeah.
cross the road here. And so everything becomes very, very dull and very, just like a very poor caricature of the world.
Yeah, your
And
mind
that's,
immediately reduces it to something that it has seen before. And I think what you pointed out is important. It's the distinction between the mind and the heart. That
yeah,
sense of coldness and staleness and daily grind 100% comes from the mind, from the filter. And it's the heart that brings in the newness. The newness is actually a real spiritual quality that comes from the heart.
yeah,
And the heart sees everything every day as new. And that's why children are so, they're always full of freshness and enthusiasm and joy for life, because they still live in their heart. They still experience the world every day as something new. And they experience interactions and their adventures every day. Like when a child comes home from school, they're full of stories of what happened that day. You ask an adult who comes from home from work, how was work today? Same old, same old.
yeah, yeah. It would be an
We miss
amazing
that.
thing to see a 55-year-old man who worked at the Dutch tax department. Like, if every day he could come home and drop off his work bag and just be full of excitement to tell all the amazing stories of what he
Yeah,
experienced, looking at the cases, and he could tell his wife or his family about his adventures. I would really love to see that. That would be such a
I'm
beautiful
sure
thing.
it can be done. I'm sure it can be. If there's
Exactly.
any 55-year-old accountants among our listeners, leave us a comment. Prove us that it can be done. So
Yeah,
newness and
wonderful.
freshness, I like that. Good. Um, the next one is that when you make spiritual progress, you start seeing the world in a very positive light. Your feelings for the world become very, very positive and hopeful. Like there's this sense of the world is a good place. And it ties back to what we often talk about, the quote by Einstein. It's important to tell yourself, are you living in a friendly or a hostile universe? And what I notice is, what we talked about my daily commute to work, I do take the bike here in Amsterdam. And every time I do my meditation in the morning, then very often, I'll have breakfast or maybe do a workout and then go to my work. And I feel that I carry my spiritual practice into my daily commute. And I see the world in such a beautiful place. I just look at the trees, at the sky, at the buildings around me. And yeah, I get this feeling of, wow, the world is really a beautiful place. And of course, then again, if you fall back to the mind will say, oh no, there's so much conflict in the world and things are going downhill. And it will immediately focus on the dark spots. That's just the nature of the mind, to kind of focus on that negative aspect. Whereas the heart is much more drawn towards everything, to the light in the world, to the divinity and the positive things.
Yeah, it's such a difficult thing for human beings to try and predict what's going to happen in the future. And so even the smartest people have been so terribly wrong about their predictions about what's going to happen in the future. I remember there was a famous scientist in the 1970s, I think, and he predicted that we were going to have this worldwide food shortage because he was looking at the numbers and he was looking at the statistics, and he's like, there's no way we could make enough food for 5 billion, 6 billion, 7 billion people. So he was predicting that there was going to be this catastrophic failure of the food supply, and there'd be mass starvation. And instead, we've seen the exact opposite of that, where even now people in sub-Saharan Africa have, a massive calorific surplus. So like everyone basically, the vast majority of people in the world are starting to get too many calories rather than not enough calories. And so this is the thing that even very smart people who think they've got the best possible information will get things totally wrong about the future. And so this always reminds me in my own life that when I look towards the world and I look towards what sort of future could possibly happen, I can never really know. I can never really calculate or figure things out. But I know in my own heart that I feel really positively towards the world, and I feel really positively towards this whole universe. And I want to see it flourish. I want to see in 1,000 years and 10,000 years that life on Earth is flourishing and blossoming and blooming, and that it's in some sort of beautiful harmony. And how the path will look to get to that point, who knows what that looks like? No one could ever calculate that. And it would only be in 1,000 years when you look back, you'd say, oh, okay, I can see now at this point, humanity was learning this particular lesson. At that point, they were learning this lesson. And so it's like when we look back at our history and our ancestors, we can see patterns and trends, but only because we've got the power of hindsight, and we've got hundreds and thousands of years of history recorded. We can see some trends and we can see some patterns. But the people living at the time, no one knew what was going on. No one could see whether it was going to turn out well, whether it was going to turn out badly. And so,
if we just look at the number of times that people predicted the end of the world, I mean, that's always a hilarious case, right? It's like they even put a date. It's going to be the 15th of February, 2021. And we got past the date so many times. So
I think it's really helpful for the world to have some people who are living in the world and are completely certain and completely positive that things are going to turn out all right. Because having some of those people around really helps the rest of us. It really helps the rest of the people around us to feel more positive about the world, because the negative forces are so strong and they can so easily convince you that, like if someone goes through and makes a list of 100 terrible things that are happening right now in the world, I'm sure someone could easily find such a list. And if they went around and told 1,000 people all of the information on their list, those 1,000 people would be like, oh yeah, you're right. Actually, no, things are going terribly.
yeah.
And so then what you've done is you've made 1,000 more people kind of depressed and gloomy about the outlook for the future. And perhaps some of those 1,000 people could have done something amazing in their life. They were on track to make something, to build something, to share something, to do anything that was going to be useful. But then they think, oh, what's the point? Like, I've seen there's this list of 1,000 terrible things or 100 terrible things that are happening right at this moment. And so you can so easily take away other people's inspiration. And I think that is one of the worst crimes that we can do, because we have no idea how someone's inspiration can change the world. And so if I can instead in my life say, hey, I don't know how, I don't know why, but I really believe that the universe is an amazing thing. And I think it's going to create something just like out of this, unbelievable. It's going to just blow all of our minds what amazing reality it's going to create in the future. If I can go around and tell people, and that's my story, and that's what I believe, that can be so beneficial and so useful to the people around us, because that's not normally the message we're getting. It's not normally the story that we're hearing in the media or hearing in social media. And so, but that could so easily be equally true, if not more so. And for those of us who are practicing a spiritual life, we've felt things and we've experienced things that have given us a level of faith that there's something deeper, there's something more beautiful, there's something transcendent happening in this universe. And although I can't show it to you with your human eyes, and I can't point to exactly where it is, I know it's happening. And that thousands of other people throughout history have had those same experiences. And all it takes for the world to start moving in that direction is like more and more people starting to feel and share that idea with others. It's that sort of critical mass that, and I mean, some
Sure.
people have done some calculations to work out the critical mass that it's like if we just need so many people meditating at such and such a time,
Yeah,
and it's going to create a change in the consciousness. But whether you have the numbers or not, it doesn't really matter. If you can feel and have faith in this universe that it's going somewhere and it's doing something that's going to be amazing. And if you can
I
share
agree.
that with people around you, that's going to be so valuable for the world and for the community around you, because has such a great likelihood of being true, and it's even got a greater likelihood of being true if more and more people believe that. Because I really feel that the universe is very responsive; it responds to the consciousnesses that are here experiencing.
Exactly. And Sri Chinmoy, from a spiritual point of view, very often commented that the divine forces will ultimately win. Like in the inner world, there's a battle going on, light versus darkness. And eventually, I mean, the darkness may win a few battles here and there, but the victory ultimately is for the divine forces. And the victory is absolutely certain. It's just a matter of time, ultimately. So no matter it's going to take centuries or millennia or millions of years, doesn't matter. As Shakespeare said, all is well that ends well. So there you go.
Oh, wonderful. I will look forward to seeing the ending of the show, because
Yeah,
what
exactly.
we've seen so far has been wildly interesting beyond my imagination.
Yeah, it's just a warming up. They just showed the trailers for the movie still to come, the main movie still to start. So that one is nice, seeing the world in a positive light. And the last one I wanted to mention is that your faith increases as you make spiritual progress. So
Mm.
faith is a real powerful thing. Faith in ourselves, faith in God, faith in the universe. So these are two aspects of faith. Like faith in yourself is very important. Faith in the higher power, whether you want to call that the universe, the divine, or God. Those two things combined, that really gives a lot of strength to your spiritual life, and it makes you grow, because we've been talking about seeing the good and knowing that it ends well. This is all coming from a place of faith, and our soul is all faith. Our soul, it knows the reality, the divine reality, is completely aware of it. And so the more of that soul comes through our spiritual practice into the other layers of our being, especially our mind, because the mind is very often prone to doubt. And if the mind gets faith, then your life becomes so much brighter, easier, and lighter. What do you want to say about faith there?
Yeah, I really like that idea of faith having to come down through the levels of our being, because I really feel that the soul is all faith. The soul has no doubt about the nature of the universe. It has no doubt about the deeper realities inside being, because the soul is the representative of all of those things. So the soul is not experiencing doubt, and the heart, hopefully, the heart is not often experiencing doubt either. But the tool that we every day using to deal with the world is our wondrously doubtful mind. And so, if we can find any way to start to bring a sense of a deeper sense of belief and meaning into our mind, it makes such a difference in our life, because otherwise it's so easy for our life just to be a constant series of highs and lows and ups and downs. And we'll see something good in the world and we'll think, oh, okay, the world's not so bad. Okay. And then the next minute, someone will crash into our car and we think, oh, the world is just full of terrible people and criminals and it's just a disaster. And so when you're living in that way, your life is there's just no consistency. One day you think the world's great and the universe is a fine thing, and the next day you just can't wait to leave. And if you can have some experiences through your practice that start to deepen and bring some of that light from the deeper parts of our being, from the heart and the soul, and bring that into the mind, suddenly the mind can start to get some respite from this doubt. And that is such a gift to give yourself. If you can just give yourself that one gift in life, some faith, it'll take away so many of your other problems, because so many of your other problems are actually on some deeper fundamental level. They're a reflection of your lack of faith in God and the universe and the divine. And so yeah, I
Yeah,
really like it. That's number 7, and
nice.
that is the 7th one, and I think it's a very profound one.
Lovely. So to wrap it up, I just wanted to go through the 7 signs of spiritual progress that we discussed. So the first one is happiness. If you feel happy, you're making progress. And correlated with that, the less negativity you feel and experience, also the more progress you're making. The second one is that your desires are decreasing. And on the other hand, your aspiration, your inner cry, your inner longing is increasing. So less desires, meaning less ego gratification, less sense gratification, and more real meaningful experiences coming from deep within. The third one is you stop blaming others for the things that happen to you in your life. You take full responsibility of your actions. You don't play the victim, but you really go from a place of agency. You can create a new self just by the actions that you're taking in the present moment, not only a new self, but also a new past, a more fulfilling past that way. The fourth one is that we become less reactionary and less impulsive. So if a stimulus is fired at us, we don't immediately snap back and respond with a stimulus like that. We don't resort to anger or jealousy or backstabbing or gossiping, but we act from a place of inner peace and poise. The fifth one is that there's a feeling of newness and freshness in your life, that this idea of staleness and the daily grind goes away and every day feels fresh and new. That comes from living in the heart, just like young children experience their life always as something new and adventurous. The sixth one is that you see the world in a positive light. You see the world as a place that is moving towards a very positive and significant goal, and you're part of that world. And so we do away with all the negative stuff and all the negative predictions of the world is going to hell in a handbasket, but instead that we have hope for the world and we believe that the end is going to be amazing. And the last one is that your faith increases, both faith in yourself and faith in the higher power, in God, in the universe. They increase. And with that faith, you make your life so much easier, lighter, and brighter. So those are some 7 signs of progress. Did you have anything, Vajin, that you wanted to add to today's discussion?
I think we did a very good job of covering all 7 points there. And I think the 7 points as well are all very valid and completely true. So thank you. Thank you
lovely.
for creating this lovely synopsis of how to be aware and how to take note of your spiritual progress.
So, dear listeners, if you enjoy our content, you can also look at some of our other videos. We did one on ego, and we also did one on when you're stuck in your meditation practice. So check those out. And if you like our content, subscribe, leave a comment, tell a friend about our podcast, and we'll see you again next week with a new episode.
Thank you.